Welcome back. You are with the Republic Media Network now. Russia has made 2 overtures to ease tensions around Ukraine, reporting a pullback of troops near its neighbor and welcoming talks with the West. But the United States and its allies have said that they needed evidence of troop movements and that the threat of a Russian invasion still looms and could perhaps be serious. Now, joining me on the broadcast is Mr. Bennett Giesman. He's the former aide to the LG of Pennsylvania. He's joining us live from Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, and also joining us on the broadcast is Yehor Brelin. He's a journalist. He's joining us from Kiev in Ukraine. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you very much for speaking to us on Republic TV. To you first, Mr. Giesman. How do you view these latest overtures from Russia? Now, President Putin yesterday, of course, said that they are willing to work on confidence-building measures with NATO. Should we be taking that seriously?
I think the West welcomes any chance at dialogue, but it's important to know that Russia has said these things in the last 2 months, and the things on the ground have told a different story. I think it's very important to be patient to see if we actually do indeed see these troop movements going back further into Russian territory. But until we see that, I think it's hard to say definitively if Putin is saying that in a matter of truth or not. I currently don't think he is. Open source intelligence says otherwise, and we'll just have to wait and see.
Right. Mr. Brelin, now Ukrainians, of course, have lived with these tensions for about 8 years. Life, as we know it, is going on normally. But does your government now believe that they perhaps, with the Western pressure coming in, have reason to believe what Mr. Putin says when he repeatedly says that I don't want to invade Ukraine?
From Kiev, well, our government have decided that today, the 16th of February, would be a day of unity. So in 2 hours, all Ukrainian national flags would be raised, and there would be some official inaugurations and other doings which may, contribute in patriotism. But after all, we still have Russian threat, but people in Kiev are very calm. But yesterday we've had cyber attack on our main bank system, and we still believe in best scenario that Russian troops would move from our borders. But we know Russia and Putin very well, and they would threaten not only Ukraine but Europe for a long time. So we need to find with our partners and allies a new form of deterrence of Russia, so that along with sanctions, we can put some strengths. And we see that NATO during last week have made crucial decisions strengthening Eastern Flank, and there would be a new multinational battle group in Romania. And today and tomorrow it would be a meeting of defense ministers of NATO, and our Ministry of Defense, Alexei Reznikov, also will join that meeting via online. So actually, people just now in Kyiv are going to their work, and there is no panic in Kyiv up for now. So, and well, cyber attack is cyber attack, but we need to be resilient to all forms of hybrid war.
Okay.
And I think that only now all world have understood that this war is against all mankind from Russia. So it's not a threat to Ukraine.
Right.
And
So what you are essentially saying, Mr. Brillian, is that there will be perhaps a hybrid war. You talked about the cyber attack yesterday, but if I could come back to Mr. Giesman over there. Mr. Giesman, the United States, of course, says we need proof. We need to see the fact on the ground that your troops are actually going back. But apart from that, how much do you feel is the fear of an economic blockade on Russia going to, in a sense, perhaps if I could diffuse the situation that we see on the ground over there?
I mean, it's difficult to say. I think Putin is a calculated leader. I feel like he already weighed these situations. And the fact that we have been very transparent with the risk of sanctions against Russia and Belarus as well, where Russian troops are stationed. And the fact that Putin is still advancing troops to the border with Ukraine, especially in attack positions, as U.S. Intel has stated yesterday. I really don't think it's a deciding factor. I hope it is. But Putin is very calculated. I'm sure he's been working on this since he invaded Ukraine in 2014. And he's weighed all of his options. Now, what he's decided to do, I do not know. The United States government doesn't know. And I hope that it's a deterrent factor. But again, none of us really know what's going to happen. It seems like Putin has made up his mind. In my own opinion, I can't speak for the United States government, but we just have to wait and see and ride it out and pray for the best.
Right. Mr. Giesman, when you speak and when we hear words come in from the United States, one of the things that really comes out strong is a trust deficit. The United States government doesn't seem to trust Vladimir Putin too much. They believe that he talks of peace, but one doesn't see that kind of action on the ground. I'd like to put that question to Mr. Yehor Brillian, who's also joining us from Ukraine. Mr. Brillian, is there a trust deficit that's at play over there?
Well, I can't say that the West have to trust Putin, and there was one good article of an Applebaum in the Atlantic that Western diplomats they don't understand Putin, that he is a hooligan in geopolitics, and he wants to change the global order. Which was formed after the Second World War, and Russia doesn't want to have negotiations. They understand only strengths. They understand when there would be truly strengths from NATO and from the United States, and only in this case Russia would change its attitude, but not for a long time.
So what you're essentially saying is that Russia believes that if it were to come from a position of strength on the ground, they would have a lot more on the negotiating table. Stay with us, both of you, Mr. Giesman as well as Mr. Brillian, live with our coverage of what's unfolding in Ukraine and Russia. Joining me on the broadcast is Mr. Bennett Giesman as well as Yehor Brillian. Both of them continue to be with us. Mr. Giesman, if I could come back to you now. Earlier on we were talking about the fact that there is a trust deficit as far as Russia is concerned. But from the Russian side, what Putin continues to maintain is that we don't want war, but we want to come to the negotiating table from a position of strength. And therefore, do you believe we see these visuals of tanks rolling in, but the Russian side continuously saying we want to talk?
Yeah, and the buildup could just be a coercion tactic. I personally don't believe it is. The only thing that has me questioning what President Putin is saying is he wants to have a negotiation, he wants to have talks, but all of his demands are non-starters to the West. He wants them to close their open door policy. He doesn't want Ukraine to ever join, and that just cannot be done. So if he was really using his military to have negotiations, you'd think he would at least present ideas to the table that could be worked on, and that just hasn't happened. And I think at this point, the buildup is so massive that if he just wanted to retreat, it's really hard for him to save face to his own people and to the West. So that's what I have to say about that. I really can't speak for President Putin. Again, I hope he wants to have a dialogue, but it's just not what we're seeing, or not what I'm seeing personally. And I just think his demands are non-starters in terms of negotiations.
Right, absolutely. Now, how much do you think is the West going to be willing to give in? Obviously, one of the key demands is that they, that Russia doesn't want Ukraine to join the NATO. The US as well as the NATO have repeatedly said that that's up to them. We are not going to tell them what to do. But how do you see the situation evolving? Could we actually be perhaps looking at a status quo, so to say, with a build-up on the borders, gradually then tempering down?
I mean, that is possible. I mean, Russia did a buildup in April of 2021 of almost 100,000 troops, about 40 to 50,000 less than we have now. I think that was just a military drill. But I mean, yeah, I mean, that could be used again as a coercion tactic. And maybe there will be some common ground between the West and Russia moving forward based off these talks, but we haven't seen anything concrete. And again, I personally hope that happens. And maybe that's in President Putin's playbook, but until that point, I really don't have commentary on the West's ability to negotiate with his current demands. I hope that they can, perhaps with missile placements in Eastern and Western Europe, come to some sort of agreement that will de-escalate, but I cannot speak for either government, and we aren't seeing that currently.
Right. Mr. Braylen, of course, also I understand has now joined us back on the broadcast. Mr. Braylen, you were earlier speaking about the fact that there is relative calm still across Ukraine. People are going on about their normal life. But how much of a heft is being placed on the West actually finding a way out of this? Ukraine continuously, of course, says that it wants peace, and there is a sense that perhaps your economy is suffering because of this constant war talk.
Yes, so we have some economic problems that some investors move finances from our country, and also there are some consequences that some embassies have moved to Lviv, it's in Western Ukraine. But I would say that a lot of foreigners, they stay in Kiev, and people which do business, for example, American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine, they are still based in Kiev, and they also find new opportunities for Ukrainian business, how to widen American-Ukrainian business partnership, and also Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce. So I think that we need to live with this threat, but to understand that life continues, and we just need to be more flexible and do the right things when we need to do it. So panic is the last thing about which we have to think now. If we would think about panic, that everything would be bad, so we can't be, democratic state in which all people can understand that they are in safety. So. And this situation can also help in revisiting Ukrainian relations with other world, so that other nations they can understand that Ukraine is a good partner, and despite of war with Russia, we are still democratic, and this hybrid war can also strengthen us. And like, for example, public diplomacy can also help with, this people-to-people links, and so.
Right.
And like during these 6 months, we have seen that a lot of foreign correspondents and foreigners, they have visited Ukraine, and they didn't see that things which Russian propaganda each day speaks to Russian audience, like here some children may be eaten or something like that.
Right, Mr. Giesman as well as Mr. Brelin, thank you for speaking to us on Republic. Appreciate the two of you joining us. Just to give you a quick recap of what's happening currently, of course, Russia has made 2 overtures to ease tensions around Ukraine, reporting a pullback of troops near its neighbor and welcoming talks with the West. But the United States of America and its allies, particularly the NATO, are saying that they still need more evidence of troop movements and that the threat of a Russian invasion is still looming. Joining me on the broadcast right now is Mr. Franak Vyakorka. He's the senior advisor to a senior politician from Belarus. Mr. Vyakorka, good morning. Thank you for speaking to us on Republic TV. To begin with, what do you make of these overtures that we are seeing from Russia? There obviously is a bit of a trust deficit as far as the West is concerned, because while Mr. Putin says that he wants peace, there is also this huge amassing of troops.
Absolutely, indeed. And troops are near the border with Ukraine, but also they're on the territory of Belarus. They're in Crimea. They're in occupied territories of Donbass, southeastern Ukraine. And the most concerning for us, Belarusians, is the build-up in Belarus. Under the cover-up of military drills, we see thousands of troops, including tanks, anti-missile systems, other sorts of equipment that came to Belarus territory and located right now near the border with Ukraine. And for us, it's very important these troops to not stay in Belarus. Otherwise, it will mean that Belarus will become the co-aggressor, co-participant of possible Russian aggression towards Ukraine.
Now, Mr. Vyakorka, there is a view perhaps that this troop build-up could actually continue, and we could see the tensions petering out very, very slowly, that it could perhaps become status quo. Is that something that Belarus actually fears?
Belarus fears that after this conflict, it will become the main victim. Because on one hand, the whole attention is on Ukraine. Mr. President Biden, Macron, Chancellor Scholz, they visited Kyiv, Moscow, speak about Ukraine, but they don't see, or Belarus is not in their focus right now. And this opens absolutely unlimited opportunities for Russian politics, for Russian military, to do what they want in Belarus. But let me remind your viewers that Belarus is a sovereign, independent country, neutral by constitution, and everything which is happening right now in the country is going against the will of Belarus people.
Mr. Vyakorka, one of the things that people are talking about is the Minsk Agreements. Now, these were, of course, never actualized on the ground. And even as the West tries to talk diplomacy, one of the ways out that is being talked about is the Minsk Agreements. Now, do you think that perhaps that could be the way forward?
There are many controversies around Minsk Agreements and Minsk II agreements. They never really worked in full, and Russia doesn't want to follow these agreements. We know that now they're considering recognition of separatist republic DNR and LNR which goes against Minsk Agreements. But it's not about agreements. You know, there is a big problem between Western politics and Eastern politics. I feel like democratic Western European politicians, they often neglect or underestimate or don't understand Kremlin, Russia approach. It's not about rational or logical things. It's about emotional things. It's about primarily symbolic domination. And the agreements, which are very sacred for Western diplomacy, don't mean much for President Putin.
Right now, you're of course talking about the emotions that were involved in this. Now, part of the emotions that everybody talks about right now is the fact that Mr. Putin actually wants to ensure that the former Soviet Union, of which he believed Ukraine is an inalienable part, should actually return to the Soviet Union. Now, that is the commentary and the narrative that is being talked of in the West as well. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and personally, I can't accept it. It sounds like someone is trying to drag us back into Cold War era, into 70s and 80s, when the world was divided between superpowers, and not the nations, not the people who decided their will, but big capitals. But we are living in 2022, 21st century. That's not the same time when Putin was young politician, or Lukashenko just started his career. But they still believe it's the same time. And what was in Soviet Union, what was in Russian Empire, this is the past. Right now we have independent Ukraine, we have independent Belarus, and no one, let me repeat, can or decide their
One last question, Mr. Vyakorka. You mentioned the Cold War. Now, does the situation right now feel very akin to that? Does it feel like this is more about a sphere of influence for the West and Russia post the Cold War? Is this the sense that you get right now?
Thank you for pointing this out. Exactly, this is the feeling what they want. They want to put the line between the Western sphere of influence and Eastern. But again, there is no such thing anymore, and we don't want this era to get back. We don't want Cold or Hot War to be back. Absolute majority of Belarusians and Ukrainians, they don't accept the idea of war at all. We're absolutely peaceful, especially considering the fact that most of the European wars in 20th century, they passed through Belarus, for example. And we want all politicians, all stakeholders, all the sides to solve the crisis by diplomatic means.
Right, Mr. Vyakorka, appreciate your speaking to us on the Republic Media Network. Thank you for joining us. And as you are saying, you believe that the Cold War is over, and that's where it should stay. Thank you.
Thank you.